So we're now recording. So again, welcome to this ULVLC session on advanced catalog searching. Anna and Tiffany, y'all can share when you want. Let me know if you have any issues. But I'm going to mute and turn my camera off so I can monitor the chat for y'all. And thank you.
All right, I think we've got the slides up, and I put them in the chat also, so y'all can follow along or consult these in the future if you would like. This session is on advanced search in the catalog. And so I'm Anna Kraft. I think most of y'all know me. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm coordinator of scholarly communications. And Tiffany will also introduce herself.
Hello, I'm Tiffany Henry. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Discovery Cataloger over in Technical Services.
Thanks, Tiffany. So this is a rhetorical question. Y'all know this search interface. Y'all all work here. Of course you know this. And I bet that you know this one too. This is our advanced search interface that is, one step beyond that main search interface. My next question is, which one is more advanced? And you don't have to answer. You can put something in the chat if you like, but you can also think about this quietly to yourself. We're going to come back to this. We're going to put a pin in this for right now and talk a little bit more about it in just a few minutes. So today we're going to cover Boolean searching and search syntax in WorldCat Discovery. We'll talk about using advanced search indexes in WorldCat Discovery and what that means. I'll talk a little bit about subject searching and the Library of Congress subject headings. If we have time, we'll do some search examples and activities, but that's also something that y'all can do on your own if you prefer. And we'll have some resources as well, some links. And this is a talk that we've done for the reference interns a couple of times. And we also did a talk like this for ULVLC back during, it was 2020, so it was sometime during COVID, early COVID. So we've made some updates. Some of this will likely be familiar. There are also some new things. Some things have changed in the catalog. So hopefully it will be interesting for all. Okay. We'll also answer questions. So if you have questions as we go through the presentation, please don't hesitate to ask. You can put them in the chat. Tiffany's going to be watching that. I actually can't see it while I'm sharing my screen, but we will be glad to answer questions. Okay, so I'm going to let Tiffany take over for the Boolean searching part.
Oh, thank you. Next slide, please. So Boolean searching is derived from Boolean algebra, which utilizes logical operators. For our purposes, these logical operators appear in search systems like our database and our library catalog to help structure queries. So WorldCat Discovery, the discovery layer for our catalog, supports the operators and, or, and not. And for these words to function as operators in the catalog, they must be in all caps when searching, otherwise the system may mistake them for search terms. Next slide, please. So the first operator, and, returns items containing all the terms in a query. So for example, if we're searching for art museums and repatriation, that will bring back resources about both topics. And the plus symbol can serve as an optional character that you can use in place of and. Next slide, please. So the next operator, or, returns items that contain any single search term or in the query or all of them. So the vertical bar or the pipe character is that optional character that you can use for or. So as an example, searching for the genre or format GE Comics or GE Manga will yield results containing items that have been assigned one or both terms. And just a quick aside, don't worry about the GE just yet. We'll get into search term indexes in a bit. Next slide, please. So the third operator, not, will exclude any of the search terms that come after it. And similar to and, the minus sign is that optional character that you can use in place of not. So for example, if you're searching for culinary arts, not hospitality, this will retrieve results only pertaining to food and culinary arts, but leave out any works where the subject is paired with hospitality. Using the Boolean not will leave out anything that may contain overlap between two topics. Next slide, please. So in addition to those Boolean operators, there are some other key characters and functions functions that will be helpful to know. And these are the 4 that I'll cover in the next couple slides: parentheses, quotation marks, truncation, and wildcards. And before jumping in, I want to mention that different systems will use different characters for these functions, namely truncation and wildcards. So I'll go over the ones that WorldCat uses, but if you find yourself searching in a different system or a database, just take a moment to check and see what symbols it uses for those functions. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the use of parentheses provides more precision in searches and is best used when you're nesting search terms within the same query. So with nesting terms, you can easily mix and match the 3 Boolean operators while telling the system in what order you prefer the search to run. So you can use parentheses to nest terms when you're using more than one operator and 3 or more search terms. So as an example here, I have the query using vegan and nutrition or cooking with the parentheses around the last 2 search terms. And running the query with or without the parentheses makes a difference in how they're retrieved. Next slide, please. So this means in the catalog will search and return items about vegan nutrition, vegan cooking, and any resources about all 3 if you use the parentheses. If we remove the parentheses around the last 2 search terms, nutrition and cooking, the catalog will process the operators in direct order with and first and or second, meaning that the search will return resources about vegan nutrition and then any resources about cooking in general. Next slide, please. So quotation marks are used for exact phrases and will keep terms together in order within the search results. So using quotation marks is ideal when the search query has multiple terms or words that could return disparate or less relevant results. And utilizing them in your search can bolster precision and accuracy. So I will mention that ULVLC has improved our catalog and discovery layer with search results over the years with regular tweaks and updates. And while you can get decent results without quotation marks, it's good to know about them and how they function. So I have 2 examples of this. The first is the search term phrase I have here is book bans. So here I'm looking for resources about censorship of books and organized efforts to do so. And the second example is the phrase not in my backyard or NIMBY, and this subject encompasses many disciplines including but not limited to residential zoning, urban planning, and environmental studies and more. Next slide, please. So for the book bans example here, here are some snapshots of both searches in the catalog and the number of results for each are highlighted with an orange box. So using quotation marks makes the number of returns plummet with 7,500 using quotation marks versus 8.6 million without. And in this scenario, while we get substantially fewer results, we also increase the likelihood of relevancy. Next slide, please. So with the first search using quotation marks, here's another snapshot of the top 2 results. Both of these results are relevant and align with the topic we're searching for. Resources about book bans. Next slide, please. So compare this to the next search. Same query terms, no quotation marks. We still get relevant results like the top 2 from the last search that we saw before, but on the first page alone, we start to see less relevant results get mixed in. And this is due to the fact that each word within our query is a topic or potential keyword on its own. Therefore, we see here we have resources about immigration bans, e-cigarette bans, and also works on books in general alongside the resources that we're looking for. And those aforementioned resources that aren't related to the topic we're searching for, but also, pardon me. So in addition to that, they retrieve them because the words books or bans appears in the record we're looking for. Next slide, please. So for the second example here, the same thing as before with the number of results. Using quotation marks will significantly reduce the number we're aiming for, but here we're looking for quality over quantity. Using quotation marks as a part of the search query drops the number of results down to 4,900 compared to the 28,000 if you don't use them. Next slide, please. So on when you're searching with quotation marks, not only does it keep the query terms together, but it also ensures that any words that the system would typically ignore or overlook gets included. The catalog will omit the word not typically because it's reserved for a different function, as I mentioned earlier. And is also a stop word in the system, and the catalog would also typically ignore it. So if you're not already familiar, stop words are some of the most common words found in a language that databases and systems will by default skip over since they appear nearly everywhere. Examples of this in English include the definite and indefinite articles like the or a. So using quotation marks ensure that these ignored words remain in the query when it's necessary that they do. And you can visually confirm this by comparing snapshots of the same item record on both searches. Both are ranked for fourth in the search results, same ebook, relevant to the topic, but the yellow highlighting indicates what the system brought back based on how the query was structured. Next slide, please. So moving on, here we have truncation. The character used for truncation is an asterisk. So when you're searching in the catalog, add it to the end of a search term to get all the possible variant endings. So you'll need a minimum of 3 characters in the search term followed by that asterisk. So as an example, using the truncation system with the term connect, we'll retrieve connect, connection, connectivity, and other variants. Next slide, please. So there are 2 symbols used as wildcard operators, the hash or pound sign symbol and the question mark. The hash will replace 1 character in a search string. So for example, using the hash over the second vowel will retrieve both woman and women in the catalog. This also works well for any words that have like alternate spellings, such as like the word advertise where you'll see S used in standard American spelling and Z used in British spelling. Next slide, please. So the second wildcard symbol, the question mark, will replace between 0 and 9 characters in a search term. So in the first example, the search term with a question mark will retrieve 2 common spellings of the term encyclopedia. And using the question mark means that the system can exceed that 1 character limitation that would be imposed if you use the hash wildcard symbol. In the second example here, adding the number 4 next to the question mark indicates how many variable characters in that string the system can bring back. So the search term with a question mark and a 4 will return respiration, restoration, reservation, and other variants that meet that requirement. Next slide, please. So it is possible to combine the different characters covered here to further refine your query. So you can combine the quotation marks, the wildcard characters, the truncation character, and any other adjustments that you need to your query. So returning to an earlier example, book bans, if we wanted to slightly expand our keyword range to not only include bans, but other variants of that word like banned or banning, then we could do that by adding an asterisk within the quotation marks around those search terms. So here is a screenshot of a top search result from that query, and that record includes the other variants of the word ban. So it's indicated by the yellow highlighting. So in that record, you have banned and banning. So go forth and try out different combinations. Next slide, please. So to read more about searching and the syntax used for WorldCat discovery, there are online guides available at the links provided here. Both of these guides cover the topics I just talked about, like Boolean searching, the syntax, as well as updated stop word lists for English, French, and German. And now I'll turn it over to Anna.
Thanks, Tiffany. All right. So I'm going to talk about using advanced search indexes in WorldCat discovery and what that means. So we've seen this, the advanced search interface. And you are probably familiar with the dropdown, which allows you to select indexes. These indexes search specific fields within records in WorldCat. And when I say fields, I'm talking about mark fields. So this slide shows an example of a couple of connections between the public interface, like the title, to the appropriate mark field, the 245. So when we're searching a specific field or index in our public search, it's going to be searching specific fields within the record. And so when you use that kind of limiter, you're only going to get results where your term or terms appear in the field or fields that are associated with that index. Your term might appear somewhere else, but if you're limiting it in this way, you're not going to see those particular results. Keyword searches, of course, are the exception. So other index searches are limited to those specific fields, but keyword searches will look for your word or phrase anywhere. So keyword searches, again, everything, everywhere. You're probably going to get a lot of results. results, which in some cases may be what you want. But with other index searches, you can be much more specific and add some refinement and precision to your search. So last time I checked, there were 26 advanced search indexes. Sometimes they change this list, but the core ones remain available. Author, title, many of the others. Occasionally they add a few things, but last time I looked at the list, we had 26 options, which is pretty good. But we actually can do better than this. So there are way more searchable indexes in WorldCat, and you can search all of them from the red search box. You don't have to click through to the advanced search. You can see a couple of additional options on this slide, but they're actually too many to list. So we can search on things like material type, physical description, genre form, and many others. And the way we do this, you saw a little sneak preview on one of Tiffany's slides of one of her searches with GE colon. So that's a genre form search. And all of these searchable indexes have an alphanumeric code called an index label. And that's what that GE colon is. You're telling it you want it to search the genre form index based on word. You can also do that based on phrase, and I'll talk about that distinction in just a minute. But you see some of these codes here. So LN for language, AU for author. Most of these are letters. Occasionally there's a number thrown in, and they end with either that colon or the equal sign. What does all of this mean? It means you can do quick, easy, and very specific advanced searches directly from that red search box. So the way that I most often use this is when I'm doing a known item search. So I know that I want a book to read, and I know exactly what it is, and I just want to find out if we have it. So I'm doing a title search, TI equals Dear Committee Members. And then the first result that I got is actually that book, which is what it should be, because that is the title, and we're searching on those words in this order. So understanding search options, this is from this link down here where you can go through each of the indexes that are available and learn a little bit more about them. And this actually is broader than just the advanced search. You're going to see things related to connection, which is a cataloging tool, and then some tools that we aren't really using for our public searching for search, collections manager query. What we're focusing on here is our index name, subject, our type, word and phrase searches, and then how it applies, how it's used, what our labels are over here for WorldShare and WorldCat Discovery. And you'll also see a note or some notes on some of the fields about unanchored versus anchored phrase searching. What this means is an anchored search is like using quotation marks, but your search is going to do that automatically for you. So your anchored search is that precise search where it's going to search on the exact phrase as it is entered. So all terms have to appear in that order. An unanchored search is like a word search. So all of the terms have to appear, but they can appear in any order, and they can have other words or letters mixed in before and between them. Different fields have different rules for if they're going to do an anchored or an unanchored search. So here's an example of a subject word search. I'm using that subject index label, SU, colon, for word, memes. And my first result was this book called Memes of Translation. When I click through, I start to see that highlighting. So it's showing that highlight in the title, in the summary, in the contents note. But the reason that I got this result in my list is that the term appears in the subjects list. That is the index that I was searching on with this particular search. Here's an example of a subject phrase search. Here I'm doing dance and conflict management. So I'm using that same SU colon, but I'm searching on a fuller phrase. And here the terms can appear in any order since this is a word search. And I see them when I click through to I can see the highlighting again, dance, conflict management in the record. You'll see that it is dropping that and, dance and conflict management, because this is a word search, it's treating that as a stop word. So should I be using this SU colon or SU equals? Again, if you want to search on the words in any order, you use that word search, SU colon. If you want them in the exact order you entered them in, SU equals. So this can make a real difference if you actually know or don't know what your authorized subject term is. So here on the left, I searched conflict management and dance, which is not the authorized heading, but it still brings back those terms because they're all in here. So the authorized heading is dance and conflict management, but I still got this result because I've got all these words. If I try to do a phrase search on this, SU equals, it doesn't bring anything back because that's not the way that that heading is structured. So this is great. What if I don't know my subject terms? Like, this won't actually help me. So subject searching can be really helpful. So I want to talk a little bit about this. And there are a couple of ways to go about finding your subjects. One is kind of a backwards route where you find a resource that you're interested in and then figure out what the subject headings are that are assigned to it so you can use that to find others. You can also go more directly by searching the Library of Congress's linked data service, which is free to search and pretty easy. Or if they're still available, you can use the Scary Red books. We'll talk about that too. So a disclaimer, there are some problems with the Library of Congress subject headings. There are efforts being made in the profession to update them, but they don't always reflect the most current, sometimes the most respectful terminology. They also don't always reflect how novice users would search. So the authorized term for a certain concept may not be a term that novice users would be familiar with. Also, this is a really large, really complicated vocabulary, but it still doesn't include terms for every concept. Especially for like very current events, things that have just happened, world events, there may not be a heading yet. So we may start to see like articles in the field and news coverage before we would see like books that would be cataloged that might have a heading created. So for really current stuff, there may not be a heading yet. And the application of subject headings relies on catalogers, humans like you and me, and the hope that we're all using good consistency and judgment and following the guidelines that we have in place with the subject headings to help us create consistent headings. Sometimes people may apply a different judgment, which can, you know, make things a little inconsistent. All of that aside, though, this can be a really useful way to search. So here I'm going to search, starting with a keyword, to try to find something that I'm interested in and see if I can find that subject heading to go with it. So here I'm searching for cats and art using that Boolean phrase. And all right, cats and art, I got a lot of results, over 21,000. And it took some scrolling before I saw something that looked relevant to my actual search. So the first thing was cats, maybe like the score or the recording. That's not what I wanted. But down around the 10th result, I saw a work called Metropolitan Cats from the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. So that looks a little more promising. A closer look, and so you can often see subject previews on that main page of results, but when you click through, you can see more. So under the Library of Congress subject headings, there's cats in art. So it's got my terms highlighted. That looks really promising. A longer subject list from a different record just to show there are additional vocabularies, subject vocabularies in WorldCat. So what I'm interested in here is the Library of Congress subject headings. Those are the headings that we in this library would apply. They're used widely in this country, but you're going to see other vocabularies too, because users and institutions around the world use WorldCat. So you may see other languages, French, German, Dutch, others. You may see medical subject headings. You may see these more simple faceted, fast subject headings. But the Library of Congress subject headings are going to appear at the top if they're there. And then by clicking on that subject heading of interest, I can see other materials that have this heading. So I got 35 results for cats in art. And one thing I want to point out here is that when I clicked on that heading, it actually created a subject word search when I was expecting that it would create a subject phrase search. So this was kind of interesting. So it brought back 35 results, and we see this highlighting again, cats in art. I was kind of expecting it would do the whole heading, a more precise search. So that was kind of surprising. But I can make this search more specific myself by using that subject phrase search. So turning that into SU equals, and then I get a more pared down results list, 18 results that are going to have not just cats art in the heading, but cats in art. Also, I can go directly to the Library of Congress and search for headings this way. And I can use that truncation, that asterisk here, because I'm not totally sure what this heading, what terms might be in here. So here I'm searching for neurodiver. I'm not sure if we might see like neurodiverse or neurodivergent, and I want to try to get a fuller picture. So here I'm searching Library of Congress subject headings. There are other vocabularies in here too. And my search results list, I got 4 results: neurodivergent people, neurodivergent youth, neurodivergent children, and neurodiversity. And here's an example of a subject authority record for a different concept, because there were a few things in this record that were not available in the others that I wanted to bring out. So some arrows here pointing out, you can see variant terms. So if somebody searched on pets and astrology, it would be redirected to this authorized term, astrology and pets. We get a broader term too. So in this hierarchy, we could go up to pets, which is more general but related. We also have an LC classification. So if somebody was looking for a work on this topic, like in the stacks, if they wanted to go up and browse, this probably isn't going to work in our collection, not just because of the renovation, but because I don't think we have anything about astrology and pets. But for a library that does, this is where you would go for that classification to find resources about this. And on the right, you can see a list of works that have been cataloged that include this heading. So this could be a starting place for certain researchers if they're trying to find works related to this topic. So we're not going to take time for this activity right now, but this is something that y'all could do on your own if you're interested in finding LCSH related to a topic that you're interested in. Also, I mentioned the Scary Red books. This is what they look like. I'm not totally sure that we have them anymore in our library. They may have been weeded. But if in some situation you are at the reference desk, we have these books, the power has gone out, or maybe just the internet is down, and some researcher really wants to find a book, and we have access to the stacks, this could be a place where you could go to find the classification for a work based on the subject. Not saying this is going to happen, but that is a situation that I can imagine needing to use these books in. They are not as up to date as that linked data service. As you can see, the ones here are from 2011, and they did stop creating these, I think, at some point because the online version is just much more up to date. Anyway, this is what we used to use. And this is what the pages look like. We're going to see another example of a structure like this, and I'll talk more about some of this in just a moment. But here's what I'm talking about with these. The authorized headings are in bold. The associated classification numbers are just below them if they have one. And we see some of these same codes, like the broader term, the UF or used for. I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment. So you probably aren't ever going to need to use the Scary Red books, but, just food for thought. Okay, so that's great, but what about other types of searches? You can combine index searching and Boolean. So here I'm doing a search for AU, Jane Austen, and MTNSR. And I got an audiobook for Emma, which is what I was looking for. What's the MTNSR piece? So MT is material type, and that is, so here I'm searching for an audiobook. NSR is the code for audiobook. You don't have to use these codes. You can use facets to do this type of searching. And I definitely do not have like these codes memorized for this MT stuff. This is just, for an example. Also, you can search on genre form terms, which is something Tiffany mentioned earlier. These can be kind of fun and useful, where the subjects that we were talking about a moment ago tell you what something is about. Your genre form terms tell you what something is. So it is a type of music. It is a type of film. It's a puzzle. It's a podcast. It's a comic. So you can actually combine some of these searches and search on to find something that's about a certain thing and also is in a certain format. So the difference here again is that isness versus aboutness. A horror movie might be assigned horror films as a genre form term because that's what it is. Whereas the horror films subject heading would be assigned to a book about horror movies because that's what it is about. So this term, horror films, is an example of a term that's used in both of these vocabularies, both as a genre form term and as a subject heading, but most terms actually don't work this way. So don't assume that because a term appears in one of these vocabularies that it's going to appear in the other. That does happen sometimes, but not always. So our search for this, we use that same interface with the linked data search, but we search within the genre form vocabulary. And here I searched for Braille. I got 3 results: Braille periodicals, Braille books, and cartographic materials for people with visual disabilities. So that's the authorized term, but the Braille piece is within like this note that kind of redirects us to the authorized term. And we can also browse these. And this list looks very similar to what we saw in the setup in the red books. So we see those authorized terms in bold. We also have scope notes on some of them. So disaster films, films that feature a man-made or natural calamity that places people in imminent danger. For films that feature individuals or groups struggling for their lives in a harsh setting, see survival films. So this hopefully disambiguates to catalogers or to users how these would be applied. Then we start to see some of these codes. So UF means used for. So instead of catastrophe films, which is not authorized, or disaster movies, we would be redirected to disaster films. We see that same thing here, again, with disaster movies. So that it's not in bold, and it tells us use disaster films. We also see BT, so our broader term here would be motion pictures. A related term, also authorized, would be survival films. There are also options for narrower terms. So that's what these codes mean. And here's an example of a catalog search using that genre form phrase. So this was done before we weeded the DVDs, but I think it's a useful example, so I kept it in. So the genre form here is dark comedy television programs. We've got our Boolean operator and keyword search for woman or women with that hash or pound symbol in that term. And so what it brought back was Orange is the New Black. We've got our genre form term, which actually appears on the subject list here, dark comedy television programs, and then our keyword is tagging onto women's here. If this is seeming kind of overwhelming, there are too many codes, there are too many labels, how am I going to remember this? How would I ever use this? Don't worry. You don't have to remember the index labels or the acronyms or the abbreviations. You really just have to know where to look to find them. There's some that I do remember because I use them a lot, like title, TI, or author, AU. But others, I would have to look them up to use them. Why would you do this, though, instead of just using facets? So that known item search, that's one that I use a lot, looking for a specific title, or trying to do a very precise search, or just wanting to do a very quick search from the red box. This will also let you set up, hopefully, depending on the search, a single search string that you can enter in one place, the red box, and that will get you, hopefully, everything that you need. So here you could construct a search string and then send it to a patron through chat or through email and say, okay, this you just enter it in the red box in this structure and it will bring back your results. And last time we did this presentation for the reference interns, some of the feedback that I got was that patrons like this. That's anecdotal, but still that made me happy. That some patrons in seeing this type of searching have found it to be useful, or at least interesting. And this can also perhaps be a way to impress people with your librarian knowledge and or skills. So a quick reality check here. Why can't I find these things? So we all want things. That's fine. We all have perhaps interests and research agendas. A patron is completely allowed to want these things, but they're not going to be able to find them because we haven't had all types of technology for all time. So some of these searches aren't possible because the form or the item just doesn't exist. But there are also searches that don't work because the metadata doesn't exist or is not recorded in the catalog record. So the available metadata doesn't always include all of the information that a patron might want. And there are good reasons for that. So here's another list of things that are completely legitimate research interests, but they're going to be difficult to find using our catalog. Any thoughts here about why these are going to be difficult searches to conduct? Any brave colleagues want to chime in on this?
So
It's
Leah
okay,
said in the chat, gender might not be captured well in MARC records.
Yes.
Personal
Yes.
info that may not be appropriate to document. It's coming from Lois. Controversial or political topics. Patrick mentions that certain language might not, didn't exist.
Yes. Yeah. These are all great points about why these types of searches might be challenging. So when I was constructing that list, what I was focused on here is the authors or creators. Sometimes the authors or the publishers choose to include biographical or personal details about that author or the creator on a resource or within a resource. And if it's there, then it's basically fair game. So it's available to catalogers, it's available to researchers, and it could show up in the item metadata. But there also may be situations where perhaps you follow a creator on Instagram, or you are aware of things that they may have said in the media, but that information isn't part of like a published item. It's really not the job of the cataloger to search out or include personal information about authors or creators, even if it might be of interest to researchers. So we don't want to be basically outing people in situations where it's not our job. And in certain political, social climates, that actually could be dangerous to certain people. But the point that I think Jenny said Patrick made in the chat about language, that also, over the course of history, that can also be something that would affect the information that's going to be, how it's recorded, what language is used, what words are available. That's a great point too. I hadn't been thinking about that. Okay, so now I want to show a couple of examples of how you might use some of these searches. So this is from a real question, and if y'all have seen a version of this talk before, then you've probably seen this, but I really like using this one because it is it's a good example of how this type of search can be helpful. So the patron came in looking for a UNCG master's thesis. She didn't know the title. She thought it was from 2004. She knows what the author's name is now, but she thinks that the author may have had a different name when the thesis was submitted. So how might we search for this? There are a couple of ways we can come at this. So we can use that name index label, either as a word search or a phrase search. We've got a year, so we could maybe use that. So here's my first attempt at this search, using that author phrase, Michelle Wilkinson, Boolean operator, and year 2004. And we could structure this in some different ways. There often with these types of searches, there's no one right answer. We could use like that, the question mark to structure this year a little bit differently. But since we think it's from 2004, we're going to start there. But I didn't get any results. So next, I tried switching this to an author word search. Didn't change anything else. Name is still the same, Boolean, year still the same. And I actually got the item that we were looking for. And the difference here is that she included her middle initial. And that is why this didn't work with that author phrase search, because that L was within her name. So here, actually, it was better to use a less precise search because we didn't realize that her name would have some additional components. So that's how we found this result, got the title, saw that it is actually from 2004, and it is this person, and we're able to connect it to the patron. And this one is based on a real question from one of the reference interns last year. I had to adjust it slightly because of weeding that happened. And so the resource that I was using as an example before isn't available anymore. Adjusting this to make the question, all right, I'm looking for works about Indigenous peoples in the format of comics and graphic novels. I know that we have these works, but I'm not getting any results. So this is the question that the reference intern brought forward. So I tried the search, SU Indigenous peoples and GE comics and graphic novels, and I didn't get anything. So my first thought was, let's get rid of that ampersand. Sometimes that can make search systems go a little awry, but I still didn't get anything. So then I did what I probably should have done first, which was check the controlled terms. So I searched for Indigenous peoples in LC, and that is an authorized term, so we're good there. Then I tried searching for comics and graphic novels, and this is where we've got a stumbling point. So I didn't get a result there in the genre form terms list. So comics criticism, but that's not what this patron was looking for. So then I went to browse the LC genre forms, and I found a couple of options. So comics graphic works is one that's pretty similar, and there's also graphic novels. So we could potentially use either of these, or maybe both, using an OR search. So let's try again. Here we've got SU Indigenous peoples and GE comics graphic works. Okay, I still also graphic novels. So we could potentially use either of these, or maybe both, using an OR search. So let's try again. Here we've got SU Indigenous Peoples and GE comics graphic works. Okay, I still didn't get anything, but don't despair yet. I need to drop those parentheses. So those, it's going to treat those as an operator here, and I need to take them out of the search. Still not quite there. Then I made one tiny change to this search string, which was to change this to a phrase search, the second component, GE equals comics graphic works. I don't know why this brought back the results and the previous one, that word search, did not. So I can't explain this, but this is apparently important in this particular search. And so we got 9 results, and they include those subject components, Indigenous peoples, as well as that genre form term. And then I got curious, so I used that phrase search for this second search term. What if I use it for the first one? I got the same results list. I can't explain what the difference is here. So if your search doesn't succeed at first, don't immediately give up. This seems on paper like it should be an exact science, but sometimes it can take some time to find that search string that's going to bring you back the results that you're looking for. And change can also be a factor. So we've got the renovation going on. There have been changes with weeding and with things moving around. This can impact availability and the results that you're going to get. Also, sometimes there are changes within OCLC and within the catalog itself, and that can impact how the searches work. So Tiffany and I have seen this over the years that we have done this presentation where we've had to make adjustments to our searches or make changes to search strings to still make them work. Is it worth it? So for me, this kind of exercise teaches me more about how to create search strings for my work. And this particular instance showed me that I need to be more aware of that colon versus equal sign distinction in some types of searches. And what actually made me really stick with this search is that I knew that there were items that we had, and I couldn't figure out why I wasn't getting those results. And not all patrons are, you're not always coming into a search knowing what exists or that you should be getting results. So that's kind of a challenge there. So is it worth it for you and your particular work? You know, it's up to you. But hopefully this can help you understand more about how the catalog can work and how it might help you in certain situations. A few other quick examples of how you might construct some searches. And again, there's probably, in most situations, not going to be one particular right search string. There may be different ways that you could set them up. So here in this first one, I'm looking for works about mythology related to North Carolina's Indigenous peoples. So I've got my SU mythology and then a lot of ands and ors. Keyword, North Carolina, although I could probably use a different index for that as well. And then then in parentheses, a whole lot of or operators along with names of Indigenous groups from this state. So in this situation, I could be getting back works that relate to just one or to multiple groups or to all of them. You can also use this to search on specific collections. Like here I'm searching for the American Trade Bindings collection and works about cats or cats. You could also be searching for works about wizards or witches for children by someone other than J.K. Rowling. So maybe you have read all of her books about witches or wizards, or you don't want to read any of them. So you can start your phrase with these parentheses around subjects witches or subjects wizards, juvenile fiction, and then exclude author Rowling.
Hey,
then,
Anna.
Yeah.
Sorry. Suzanne asked, would it provide the same result to use North Carolina in quotation marks or North Carolina in parentheses?
That's a good question. My first thought is that it is probably going to provide the same result, but I would have to try it because sometimes it does things that I don't expect. So probably, but seeing it is believing it. Good question. This last example on here, memoirs by female singers. So here we're getting at a group of people where you are actually probably going to find like a class of persons where you can actually find results. So if it's a memoir or an autobiography, probably that author or that individual is going to be self-disclosing information about them versus where if we're looking for, say, like all of the plays written by trans women, that's, if you're writing a play, you're not necessarily self-disclosing information about yourself. If you're writing a memoir, you probably are providing information about yourself. So searching for memoirs about a certain group of people, your search is probably going to be more successful than trying to search for other types of forms about a class of persons. Anyway, okay. We have some time for search practice, but I think I'd rather just do questions at this point. And we can, show some of these search practice examples as well if there are no questions. Do y'all have any questions or thoughts? I'm going to stop sharing so I can see the chat.
Yeah, Anna, it looks like the recording stopped, but according to my note, like my screen, it didn't. Like when I go to see what's going on with the recording, it says it's still going. So I don't know why that's happening in the chat. Just FYI, in case you're panicked. I guess worst case scenario, we just missed the last little part, but I don't think that's happening because it says it's still recording on my end. So who can say? But if anyone has any questions, you can put it in the chat or unmute at this point.
Yeah. And I would love to know, even if you don't have questions about this, if y'all have used this type of searching and if it has been useful to you, if it has been helpful to patrons, helpful to you, if there are things that you have learned doing this type of searching, or even if you're like, nah, this isn't for me.
People might be thinking of questions just like back in the chat. Maggie pointed out that she had no idea about the difference between a colon and an equal sign. And a lot of people were like, yeah. And a lot of people's mind has been blown throughout the presentation in the chat. Okay. So Josh, you're first up with questions.
All right, thanks. Well, thanks to both of you for this wonderful presentation. I really felt like I learned a lot with it. I've noticed the thing that Maggie said about like the difference between the colon and the equals when you're using these like search index labels. And my approach has just been like a trial by error because I didn't understand the difference. So like I would try one. If it didn't give me what I wanted, I'd try the other. And I found myself like doing the equal sign and then like parentheses to try to like reinforce a phrase search. And I don't know if that like has any advantage or is it just redundant?
So probably if you're doing that phrase search with the equal sign, it probably is not going to add anything. But if you really, well, what I probably would do something similar to what you said in terms of kind of trying it, seeing what happens. And you also can dive into the documentation because some of the fields actually treat those slightly differently with those anchored versus unanchored searches. And frankly, I think it's impossible to memorize how the differences in how all those fields work. So in most cases, it's probably not going to, you're adding those parentheses is probably not going to add extra precision, but I would try it and see if you do get a different result. And I would be very curious to know if you do. And I see that Andre said, yes, you can definitely share it with student workers. I think we probably will put it on YouTube.
Is YouTube okay? I mean, I didn't see anything private go on the screen. Y'all did great with screenshots and not showing like account information and stuff. So if you're okay, I think the student workers would be able to access this the best way through YouTube so that they don't have to like go through the channel, which I don't think they have access to. Okay, great.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Tiffany, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think I covered it.
Okay, awesome. Leah, I see your hand as well.
Hello. Yes, thank you. I learned so much from this. I always appreciate being in these sessions taught by catalogers and metadata librarians. I use those field labels quite often. I love them. Like the title : TI : and one thing that always trips me up, and I know you probably mentioned this, is I will get super excited about searching for words within a title, and then I'll type an and I'll type something else that I don't intend to be part of the title, and it'll throw my search off. So I don't know, if for anybody who wants to start using the field labels, maybe keep in mind, put your unrestricted word first if you're going to have one, I guess, or a word that you want searched anywhere. But
yeah, that's a good point about, so like some terms are going to could potentially in certain search systems be mistaken for those operators, like the and or the or, although hopefully with OCLC, if it's in capitals, that's the only time. But there also are those stop words, which can throw things off. And I don't know if this happens in WorldCat Discovery, but I know in my own searching and like OCLC Connection, when I was doing cataloging, there was one time when I was searching on a title that included with in the title, and I could not get anything. And then finally realized that, oh, it's treating this as an operator. Why? So yeah, the catalog searching, it feels sometimes more like an art than a science, though it probably is a science that I don't fully understand, and maybe not an art. I don't know.
Yeah, I always love hearing who can say, or, that's brilliant. And I loved all the examples throughout that you and Tiffany gave. Thank you.
Thanks, Leah.
Since we have a lot of people in this room, this was, of course, very helpful. But I get a lot of questions from both undergrads and graduate students about particularly what Tiffany covered in terms of parentheses versus quotation marks versus, that like kind of before it went into even more advanced stuff. Do you think it would be okay to take at least the slides, or again, maybe the first little part of this video and make a video to put on our catalog tutorials? What do y'all think?
Yeah, that sounds fine to me if it'll be useful for folks.
Yeah, I mean, Leah said yes. We have a LibGuide, WorldCat Discovery LibGuide that Leah maintains, that we have like how to use the catalog video, and like, again, I think it would be useful to have, again, at least the first part of this video and maybe the slides available on there. We could do a PDF of it. Just because, again, I know not every student wants to know like the advanced stuff. But again, I get a lot of like, again, they definitely want to know, I think, the parentheses, quotation marks, stuff like that too. So yeah. Okay, cool. I'll touch base, but I can cut videos up. I can do it. Okay, well, we have 1 minute left. Anything else? Suzanne said, I think tidbits on social media would be helpful to students. Did you know you can search ... question mark? Yes. Interesting. We'll have to let Rachel know.
Yeah. Thanks, y'all, for the thoughts in the comments. It's helpful. Some of the stuff that we've incorporated into this particular presentation has been based on questions that have come up in both the Boolean section that Tiffany talked about and in some of the examples that I shared. So we really like hearing about real world situations where this stuff has been used, or where, questions have come up. That can help us improve this talk for future sessions with reference interns and with others. and with other documentation if we end up sharing it other places too.
Great.
So thanks.
And since this was so helpful and great, I'll just send the YouTube video out when I'm done uploading it to Jackson L, like as a reply to my, reminder email, so everyone has it clearly. And then if you need it immediately, the recording in Teams is in the Teams channel, but that way people can just have access to it, send it to students, put it on guides, whatever you all need to do. So thank you all. It's 11. Perfect timing, everyone. So I'm stopping the recording.